FP3 is just finished, and George Russell is absolutely flying this weekend. He's put it in P1 again. The top three for this session was Russell, Norris and Piastri, all within 4/10. Alex Albon is absolutely flying in the Williams. He put it into P4 with his soft tyre run. Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen are just behind in P5 and P6. The Alpine of Esteban Ocon put his car in P7. Williams will be impressed with Logan Sargent. He finds himself in P8 after FP3. Both Williams drivers ahead of the AlphaTauris in that battle for 7th so far. Yuki Tsunoda put his car into P9 for AlphaTauri. They'll be looking to beat Williams this weekend. They need a 7-point swing to finish 7th in the Constructors this year. Guan Yu Zhou put his car in P10 for Alfa Romeo. He was ahead of his veteran teammate Valtteri Bottas. Before we get into the next part of this video, 58% of you aren't subscribed. What are you doing? Click the red button. Some key takeaways from this session. Max Verstappen was consistently complaining of struggles with his balance. The car wasn't working to the way he expected it to. That could be as a result of the rookie drivers in FP1. However, he's made several setup adjustments this session, including mainly the front suspension. Although making these changes, he couldn't see himself rise any higher than P6 in this free practice 3 session. Lewis Hamilton is another driver who's struggling. He finds himself way down the order. He is 8.5 tenths behind his teammate, and he's not quite sure where the difference is. The two Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz seem to be struggling. Carlos Sainz doesn't know where the time is, and he finished at the bottom of the timings, over 1.3 seconds behind. Charles Leclerc set a fast lap right at the end of the session, putting himself P5, but he again doesn't know where the 6/10 is to George Russell. Sergio Perez puts his car into P11. That won't be good enough in qualifying. I'm sure the Red Bulls will be expecting to be much higher up in the field. Heading into qualifying, there has been a pit lane rule change as a result of the incidents involving Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, George Russell and an Alpine yesterday. Max Verstappen overtook on pit exit. This is something that should be prohibited and used to be prohibited. After a recent rule change regarding the pits, after Max Verstappen stopped in Singapore in the pit lane to build a gap, this has led to this incident. Max Verstappen overtook yesterday, and now that will be prohibited heading into qualifying. All drivers must be moving, and you can only overtake if there is a problem with the vehicle ahead. Some other key news this weekend is that Aston Martin are looking to extend the contract of Fernando Alonso beyond the 2024 season. Fernando Alonso came into Aston Martin replacing 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel last year. He has since done a very good job and he is in the battle for P4 in the Drivers' Championships this year. Fernando Alonso has a range of podiums this year after they started the season with the second quickest car. After a few upgrades from teams around them and some unbeneficial upgrades from themselves, Aston Martin slipped down the grid. Aston Martin at points were 5th fastest this season, sometimes even lower depending on the track. Fernando Alonso and Aston Martin will be hoping that they can bounce back over this off-season and even in the race weekend at Abu Dhabi. Some big shocks in qualifying as Lewis Hamilton was out in Q2 and Carlos Sainz was out in Q1. Logan Sargent was unable to set a lap due to track limits and found himself losing the seasonal head-to-head 22-0 to Alex Albon this season. Sargent, who is still after a new contract for next year, won't be impressed with his performance, although he has been driving quite well this weekend. Sainz was out in Q1 after finishing P16 after finding traffic on his lap due to not getting out at the optimal time. This is bad news for Ferrari fans who want to beat Mercedes to P2 in the World Constructors' Championships. In some positive news for Ferrari, Charles Leclerc finds himself in P2 ahead of the start tomorrow. This is pivotal for Ferrari as they look to bridge the gap to Mercedes, which is 4 points. They look to beat that tomorrow. Lewis Hamilton wasn't happy with his car. He finds himself down in P11 for tomorrow's start. He said that there is something wrong with the car. Whether there is or not, who knows, but it is another struggle for Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton has already said that he's looking forward to getting rid of the W14 and he's looking forward to seeing what the W15 offers. James Allison has been keen not to put too much pressure onto the W15, but it's pivotal that this car breaks the boundaries that the W14 couldn't. The removal of the zero-pod DNA will be pivotal to next season. Besides Hamilton's struggle, George Russell finds himself in P4 ahead of tomorrow's start, sandwiched in between the two McLarens of Norris and Piastri. Russell has looked on it all weekend, and I'm surprised he isn't higher up the grid. He must be disappointed with P4. Oscar Piastri outqualifies Lando Norris in P3 and Lando Norris in P5. Oscar Piastri is once again showing what a bright spark he can be for the future of F1. It is the best rookie season since Lewis Hamilton came onto the grid. The two big shocks into Q3 were Yuki Tsunoda and Nico Hülkenberg, who put it in P6 and P8 respectively. Sergio Perez with yet another skill issue as he struggles against Max Verstappen, only being able to put the most dominant car in Formula 1 history into P9, whereas Max Verstappen put it on pole. On the front row of the grid, we have Max Verstappen on pole and Charles Leclerc P2. On the second row, you have Oscar Piastri and George Russell. On row 3, you have Lando Norris and Yuki Tsunoda. On row 4, you have Fernando Alonso and Nico Hülkenberg. Row 5 sees Red Bull driver Sergio Perez line up next to former Red Bull driver Pierre Gasly. Row 6 sees Lewis Hamilton line up next to Esteban Ocon. Row 7 sees Lance Stroll line up with Alexander Albon. The next row sees former Red Bull driver Daniel Ricciardo line up against Ferrari driver Carlos Sainz. The next row sees Kevin Magnussen line up with Valtteri Bottas. And the final row of the grid is Guan Yu Zhou and Logan Sargent. Make sure to go and find me on TikTok, pictured here, and Twitter, pictured here. These are the places where I'll keep you all up to date with all my upcoming videos and my thoughts and feelings around the Formula 1 and football weekend.